Good morning, everyone. Happy Tuesday. Welcome back to the Self-Talk Challenge. This is going to be day 5. And last week we talked about specific words that can be helpful or harmful depending on the context we're using, depending on whether we use them shorthand. This week we're going to talk about more conceptual ones, and this week we're going to talk about the story I'm telling myself. Basically how we interpret said events and the effect it can have on our mood and then consequently on our reactions to them. So this comes from Brene Brown. She would say the story I'm telling myself. And there's 4 components to it. There's the data, there's the judgments, there's your assumptions, and then the consequences you believe are going to happen. So for example, we could say, my accountant, by the way, I'm waiting for an email from my accountant, and I could make a story like, they're ignoring me, they're being rude, they're being slow, they're being lazy. And that's a story I'm telling myself. Now, this doesn't mean just because I use the word story that it's complete fabrication and I'm out of my mind. If you don't like the word story, you could say, this is the conclusion I'm drawing. But for example, the data point is that I haven't read an email from my accountant in the reply. Now, this doesn't mean that they haven't sent that, because they could have sent it and there could be a problem with the email servers. Gmail could have signed me out of my phone for that particular email account, for example. They could have written it, they could have pressed send. Okay, it could have gone to my spam folder. So the only data point I have is that I haven't seen the email yet. And that's an important thing. You could also think of it like someone is late or someone didn't reply to my text message. There could have been a problem with WhatsApp, for example. So that's the data point. I haven't seen it. Now the judgment is when we start saying they are or you are. So the judgment would be, they're inconsiderate, they're slow at their job, they're ignoring me. So what we're doing is we're applying a motive to why that thing hasn't happened. So you're meeting a friend, you meant to meet them at 12, they show up at 12:15. The judgment is, they're late, they're inconsiderate, they don't value my time. And why we say these things is that when we get curious about it, we're no longer reacting. So we're applying, what judgment are we applying? What motive are we putting to the story? What emotion are we putting into the story? Then the assumptions are that the accountant saw my email, that they're in work, that they're able to do the work, that they're not waiting on someone else, that they're not waiting on revenue or some other government body to get back to them, that they're capable of sending it. All these are just assumptions. So again, your friend meeting them in the park, the assumption could be that they could leave their house in the time, that there wasn't a problem with their kid or with work or a car crash on the way that they got them stuck in traffic, that they had phone signal and they were able to message you ahead of time. And again, by noticing the assumptions we're making, we get curious rather than in this fixed, no, this is exactly what happened mode, because there's always probably more to the story than we know. And then finally, the consequences are, what disaster, for one of a less extreme word, what disaster are we making up in our head about why this is happening? So the consequences of my accountant not replying to me is, well, this will mean I won't get my mortgage approval through in time and I'll miss that apartment or that house I really want to buy. The friend who shows up means, well, this means nobody loves me and I'm going to die alone under a bridge somewhere. I'm being ridiculous on purpose because we make up these consequences in our head. And when we bring them to the light, we can see is that they're just one of a number of possible alternatives to it. Why is this important again is that when we recognize that we're very rapidly coming up with reasons for things happening and consequences in our head, when we bring them to light, we can stay in a curious state. And when we stay in a curious state, we're less reactive. This is really good when something happens to use the story I'm telling myself, which is the data, the judgments or the motives, the assumptions, and then the consequences. Yeah, let me know how you get on with this, guys, in comments. Thanks.